The massive alien ship appeared above Earth on a Tuesday morning. It was bigger than any city on the planet. Its shadow fell over the Pacific Ocean like a dark blanket. People around the world stopped what they were doing and looked up at the sky. Fear spread faster than any news report could travel. Admiral stood on the observation deck of his ship, the Eternal Conquest. He looked down at the blue planet below him. His gray scales reflected the light from nearby stars. His yellow eyes studied Earth the way a buyer studies something cheap at a market. He had seen many worlds before. He had conquered most of them. This one would be easy. His species, the Helix Dominion, was part of something called the Galactic Sovereignty. They controlled hundreds of star systems. They had weapons that could destroy mountains with a single shot. They had shields that could stop asteroids. They had ships that could travel faster than light itself. Earth had none of these things. Had read the reports about humans. They had no energy shields around their planet. They had no defense cannons in space. Their fastest ships could barely reach their own moon. By every measurement the sovereignty used, Earth was defenseless. It was like finding a village with no walls in a world full of armies. "Send the transmission," ordered his communication officer. The message went out to every screen, every phone, every radio on Earth. His face appeared everywhere at once. His voice was translated into every human language. "People of Earth," he said, "I am Admiral of the Helix Dominion. Your world has been selected for absorption into the galactic sovereignty. You have no means to resist. Prepare for integration. Any attempt to fight will result in destruction." In Seoul, inside the United Earth Council chambers, the delegates sat in shocked silence. There were representatives from every nation on the planet. They had come together years ago when the first alien signals were detected. Now their worst fears had come true. Some delegates were crying. Others were arguing loudly. A few just sat there, unable to speak or move. The holographic image of Admiral floated above them like a ghost made of light. Park watched all of this from his seat. He was 62 years old. His hair was gray, and his face had the lines of a man who had spent many years thinking hard about difficult things. Before he became a politician, he had been a professor. He had taught military history at the best university in Korea. He had written 12 books about war. He knew more about human battles than almost anyone alive. And right now he was not afraid. He was angry. Stood up slowly. The room went quiet. Everyone knew him. Everyone respected him. When he spoke, people listened. "Admiral," he said, his voice calm and clear, "I believe you have made a mistake." On the Eternal Conquest, eyes narrowed. No species had ever talked back to him during a conquest announcement. This was unusual. He was curious. "Explain yourself, human," he said. Walk to the center of the chamber. He pulled out his tablet and connected it to the main display. An old photograph appeared on the screens. It showed soldiers in heavy coats, standing in snow, holding simple rifles. Their faces were hard and tired but not defeated. "You say we are defenseless," said. "You have counted our ships. You have measured our weapons. You have studied our technology, but you have not studied us. You have not studied what we are." Leaned forward in his command chair. His tactical officer commander whispered to him, "This is a waste of time, Admiral. Give the order to begin." But raised his clawed hand for silence. Something about this old human interested him. There was no fear in his voice. There was something else. Something had not heard in a very long time. "Continue," said. Change the image. Now it showed an ancient battlefield. Thousands of arrows filled the sky like rain. Men with spears stood in tight formation against an army that stretched to the horizon. "This is Thermopylae," said. "Almost 2,500 years ago. 300 soldiers from a place called Sparta stood against an army of over 100,000. They knew they would die. Every single one of them knew. There was no hope of survival, no chance of victory. They fought anyway." He paused to let the words sink in. They held that pass for 3 days, 300 against 100,000. When they finally fell, they had killed so many enemies that the invading army was weakened forever. Those 300 men changed history. On the alien ship, a young officer named checked the humans' claims against the sovereignty's database. The story was true. The numbers were real. Admiral said quietly, "He is not lying." Said nothing. He was watching the old human professor with new interest. Looked directly at the holographic image of. His eyes were steady. His voice did not shake. "You think we are defenseless because we have no shields. You think we will surrender because we have no fleet. But you do not understand us. You do not understand what humans do when we are told we cannot win. You do not understand what happens when you corner us." He took a deep breath. "So let me tell you, Admiral. Let me tell you about battle. Let me tell you what we are capable of. And then you can decide if Earth is really as defenseless as you think." The chamber was completely silent. Every delegate was watching. Every screen on Earth was showing this moment. And in space, aboard the most powerful warship in the sector, Admiral found himself doing something he had not done in over 50 years of conquest. He was listening. Admiral had conquered 37 worlds. He had broken the will of species that were far more advanced than humans. He had seen empires crumble and civilizations beg for mercy. But he had never seen anything like what Park was showing him now. The old professor stood in the center of the United Earth Council chamber, surrounded by the leaders of humanity. His tablet was connected to every screen on Earth and to the alien ship above. He was giving the most important history lesson anyone had ever given. "Let me tell you about a man named Yi," said. A new image appeared on the screens. It showed a painting of a Korean admiral in ancient armor. He stood on the deck of a ship with a dragon's head at the front. 400 years ago, our country was invaded. The enemy had over 300 warships. Admiral Yi had only 13. 13 ships against 300. By your logic, Admiral, he should have surrendered. He should have run away. There was no logical reason to fight. His voice grew stronger. But Yi did not run. He studied the water. He learned the currents and the tides. He found a narrow strait where the enemy's numbers meant nothing, and then he attacked. On the Eternal Conquest, Commander was running the numbers through her computer. The mathematics made no sense. 13 against 300 was not a battle. It was suicide. "What happened?" asked. He did not realize he had spoken out loud. "Admiral Yi destroyed 31 enemy ships," said. He did not lose a single one of his own. 13 ships against 300, and he won. Not because he had better weapons. Not because he had more soldiers. He won because he refused to accept defeat. The young alien officer was searching through the sovereignty's historical databases. Every claim the human made was true. These were not stories. These were facts. Defense Minister Sumi stepped forward to join. She was 45 years old with sharp eyes and a straight back. She had served in the military for 20 years before entering politics. She knew what it meant to fight. "You want to know our greatest weapon," she said, looking up its image. "It is not in our arsenals. It is not something you can count or measure. It is in our blood. It is in our bones. When humans are cornered, when we are told we are finished, something changes inside us. We do not become weaker. We become more dangerous." She pulled up a new image. It showed a city reduced to rubble. Buildings were shattered. Streets were filled with debris. Smoke rose from fires that had been burning for months. "This is Stalingrad," she said. "During our Second World War, an enemy army tried to take this city. They had more soldiers, more tanks, more planes. Our people had almost nothing, but they refused to give up." The images changed. They showed soldiers fighting in frozen ruins. They showed women carrying ammunition through destroyed streets. They showed children helping to build defenses out of broken furniture and stones. "They fought for every building," Sumi said. "Every room, every floor. They fought in the sewers. They fought in the factories. When they ran out of bullets, they fought with knives. When they ran out of knives, they fought with their hands. Claws tightened on his command chair. "How long?" he asked. 900 days, Sumi answered. "Almost 3 years. The enemy lost over 700,000 soldiers trying to take that city. They never succeeded. Our people would not let them." On the alien ship, the mood had changed. The officers who had been bored were now paying attention. The soldiers who had been laughing at the weak humans had stopped laughing. Something cold was growing in their stomachs, something that felt almost like fear. Took control of the screen again. He showed image after image, battle after battle, humans fighting when they should have surrendered, humans winning when they should have lost. He told them about the siege of a place called, where 150 soldiers held against thousands for days without food or water. He told them about the Winter War, where a tiny country called Finland fought against an enemy 40 times its size and made them pay for every frozen inch of ground. He told them about resistance fighters who lived in forests and mountains, attacking invaders for years without rest. "You have studied our planet," said, "but you have not studied our history. We have been fighting since the beginning of our species. We have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We have developed ways of war that you cannot imagine. Every time someone tried to conquer us, we found a way to fight back. Every single time." Commander leaned close to Admiral. Her voice was quiet so the humans would not hear. "Admiral, these creatures are insane. They fight when there is no hope. They die rather than surrender. What kind of species does this?" Did not answer immediately. He was thinking about his own species. When the odds were bad, the Helix Dominion calculated the cost and made logical decisions. Sometimes they surrendered to save lives. It was efficient. It was smart. Humans did not think this way. Seemed to read his thoughts. The old professor looked directly into the camera, directly at. "You think surrender is logical," he said, "and maybe it is, for your kind. But for us, there are things worse than death. Slavery is worse than death. Watching our children lose their future is worse than death. Giving up everything we are, everything we have built, everything we love, that is worse than death." He let the words hang in the air. "So when you ask us to surrender, you are not offering us life. You are offering us something worse than dying, and we will never accept that. Never." The transmission continued. More battles, more stories, more examples of humans doing impossible things because they simply refused to quit. And in his command chair, Admiral began to understand something. He had made a mistake in his assessment. Earth was not defenseless. Earth was the most dangerous planet he had ever found. 3 days had passed since the alien ship appeared above Earth. 3 days since Park had begun his history lesson. And in those 3 days, Admiral had not slept. He sat alone in his private quarters, surrounded by holographic displays. Every screen showed something different: human wars, human weapons, human tactics. He had ordered his officers to download everything they could find about Earth's military history. What they found had changed everything. The Helix Dominion had a simple method for conquest. They would arrive at a planet with overwhelming force. The native species would calculate the odds, realize they could not win, and surrender. It was clean. It was efficient. It saved lives on both sides. In 50 years had never faced serious resistance. Why would anyone fight when fighting was hopeless? But humans did not think this way. Studied a map of something called Vietnam, a small country, poor, weak by every measure. They had faced an enemy with the most advanced weapons on Earth, planes that could drop fire from the sky, bombs that could flatten mountains, technology that seemed like magic. The people of Vietnam had fought anyway. They had dug tunnels under the ground. They had hidden in jungles. They had attacked and disappeared like ghosts. They had fought for 20 years. And in the end, the country with all the advanced weapons had given up and gone home. The humans had a name for this. They called it guerrilla warfare. pulled up more files. He found thousands of examples. Humans had been fighting like this for centuries. They would hide in forests, in mountains, in cities. They would attack supply lines. They would strike at night and vanish by morning. They would make occupation so painful, so expensive, so exhausting that eventually the conquerors would leave. Commander entered his quarters without knocking. She looked tired too. Her scales had lost some of their shine. "I have completed the analysis you requested," she said. "The results are not good." She transferred a file to his main display. Numbers and projections filled the screen. "If we attempt a ground invasion of Earth," she explained, "we can expect resistance in every city, every town, every village. Based on their historical patterns, humans will fight for an average of 47 years before organized resistance breaks down. Even after that, we can expect attacks and sabotage for another 3 to 4 generations." Stared at the numbers, casualties. "On their side, approximately 2 billion dead. On our side," paused, her voice became quieter, "approximately 8 million soldiers, every year, for the entire duration of the conflict." 8 million soldiers every year for 47 years. It was an impossible number. The entire Dominion army was only 30 million strong. "And if we simply destroy their cities from orbit?" asked. Shook her head. "I considered that option. The humans have something called nuclear weapons, primitive compared to our technology but effective. They have already used these weapons on themselves. Twice. They will use them again if we push them far enough. They would rather destroy their own planet than let us have it." Closed his eyes. He remembered a phrase from the human history files. They called it scorched earth. If humans could not keep something, they would burn it rather than let their enemies have it. They had done this for thousands of years. On Earth, Doctor was being brought to the council chamber. She was a scientist who studied how different species think. She was 40 years old with kind eyes and a gentle voice, but her words were not gentle today. "I have been studying the aliens' behavior patterns," she told the assembled delegates. "I believe they are reconsidering their position." Park nodded. He had suspected as much. The alien ship had not moved in 3 days. No demands had been made. Something had changed. "What should we do?" asked one of the younger delegates. His voice was hopeful. Shook her head. "We should not celebrate yet. A wounded predator is the most dangerous kind. If they feel trapped, they might attack anyway. We need to give them a way out, a way to leave without feeling like they have lost." Defense Minister Sumi disagreed. "We should press our advantage, show them more, make them afraid." "Fear can make enemies retreat," said, "but it can also make them desperate. We do not want them to feel they have no choice but to fight. We want them to choose to leave." The debate continued for hours. On the alien ship, a similar conversation was happening. Admiral had called his senior officers together. He showed them everything he had learned, the history, the numbers, the projections. When he finished, the room was silent. "We cannot conquer them," finally said. "Not without losses that would cripple the Dominion for generations. These creatures are something we have never encountered before. They are not rational. They do not calculate odds the way we do. They fight because fighting is who they are." The young officer raised his hand. "Admiral, there is something else. I have been studying their technological development." He brought up a timeline on the display. 120 of their years ago, humans traveled by horse. They communicated by paper letters. Their weapons were simple metal tubes that fired small pieces of lead. Today, they have nuclear reactors, global communication networks, and primitive spacecraft. Let the information sink in. They went from horses to nuclear power in 120 years, from paper letters to instant global communication. If we leave them alone for another 100 years, what will they have? If we leave them for 200 years? The room became very quiet. Understood what was saying. Humans did not just fight well. They learned. They adapted. They improved. What would happen when these crazy, stubborn, impossible creatures developed faster-than-light travel? What would happen when they had energy shields and planetary cannons? "They will come for us," Commander whispered. "If we attack them now and fail, they will remember, and they will come for us." Stood up slowly. He walked to the window and looked down at the blue planet below. He had come here to conquer a defenseless world. He had found something else entirely. He had found a species that could not be conquered, a species that would rather die than kneel, a species that would burn its own home rather than give it away. But maybe, just maybe, they could be something else. Maybe they could be allies. The message came from the alien ship at midnight. It was short and simple. Admiral wanted to meet, in person, alone. The request sent shockwaves through the United Earth Council. No alien had ever set foot on Earth before. The idea of one of them coming down, walking among humans, seemed impossible. Many delegates were afraid. Some thought it was a trap. Park thought it was an opportunity. After hours of debate, a compromise was reached. The meeting would not happen on Earth. It would happen on a small space station at the edge of the solar system. Both sides would bring limited security. Both sides would come in peace. 2 days later, found himself floating through a metal corridor toward the meeting room. With him were Defense Minister Sumi, General, and Ambassador Moon. They wore simple suits with no weapons. Their only protection was the knowledge that needed something from them. The meeting room was circular with a large table in the center. Half of the chairs were designed for humans. The other half were taller, built for alien bodies. The lighting was soft and neutral. Admiral was already waiting. He stood near the window looking out at the distant stars. Up close, he was even more impressive than his hologram had shown. He was tall, almost 3 meters, with gray scales that seemed to shift color in the light. His yellow eyes were old and tired. "Thank you for coming," said. His translator made his voice sound almost human. "I know this requires great trust." General was the first to speak. He was 70 years old, a soldier who had spent his entire life preparing for wars he hoped would never come. His voice was rough like gravel. "Trust is earned," he said. "You came here to conquer us. Why should we trust you now?" Turned to face them. His expression was difficult to read, but there was something in his eyes that looked almost like respect. "Because I have studied your species," he said, "and I have learned something important. Conquest would destroy us both. You would fight until nothing remained. Your cities would burn, our armies would bleed. In the end, there would be no winner, only ashes." Ambassador Moon stepped forward. She was 53 years old with silver hair and a calm presence. She had spent 30 years finding peaceful solutions to impossible problems. "So what do you propose instead?" she asked. Pressed a button on his wrist device. A holographic image appeared above the table. It showed a star map with hundreds of systems marked in red. "The galactic sovereignty is dying," he said. The humans looked at each other in confusion. They had expected threats, demands, negotiations. They had not expected this. Continued. "There is an enemy we have been fighting for over 1,000 years. We call them the Void Swarm. They are not like us. They do not want territory or resources. They want only to consume. They move from system to system, eating everything in their path. Planets, ships, people, everything." The red markers on the map began to pulse. "These are the systems we have lost to them in the last century alone. 147 worlds, trillions of lives. We are losing this war. Slowly but certainly, we are losing." Defense Minister studied the map with military eyes. "How large is this swarm?" "We do not know," admitted. "We have never seen its end. They have millions of ships, perhaps billions. Each ship is a living creature born from a hive mother. They feel no fear. They feel no mercy. They cannot be reasoned with or bribed. They only consume." General leaned back in his chair. "And what does this have to do with us?" Looked directly at the old soldier. Everything. We need soldiers, not slaves, not servants. Soldiers. Fighters who will stand when hope is gone. Warriors who will hold lines that cannot be held. Species that refuse to surrender. He gestured at the humans. I have conquered 37 worlds. Every single one of them surrendered when they saw our fleet. Every single one calculated the odds and gave up. Then I came to Earth. I showed you my weapons. I showed you my ships. And what did you do? He paused. You opened a history book and taught me about war. Smiled slightly. It was the first time he had smiled in days. You want us to fight your war for you, he said. No, replied. I want you to fight our war with us. There is a difference, one I have only recently learned. Ambassador Moon raised her hand. And what would humanity receive in return? Words are easy. We need more than words. Pressed another button. A new holographic display appeared. It showed technical diagrams, mathematical formulas, engineering blueprints. The humans could not understand most of it, but they recognized enough to know what they were seeing. Faster than light travel, said. Energy shields. Medical technology that can cure diseases you have fought for centuries. Clean energy that will solve your climate problems. Communication systems that can connect your entire species in real time. He looked at each human in turn. Everything we have, every piece of technology, every secret, every advantage, we will give you all of it, not because we are generous, because we need you. The Void Swarm has beaten our best armies. They have destroyed our strongest fleets, but they have never faced creatures like you. They have never faced a species that does not know how to quit. General was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked the question that mattered most. How bad is it, the truth? Shoulders sagged slightly. For the first time he looked tired, old, afraid. The swarm is 30 years from reaching sovereignty core worlds, maybe less. When they arrive, trillions will die. Our civilization will end. Everything we have built for 10,000 years will be consumed. He straightened up again. But if we had allies, real allies, fighters who could slow them down, who could find weaknesses we have missed, who could think in ways we cannot imagine, perhaps we could survive. Perhaps we could win. The room was silent. The weight of the decision pressed down on everyone. Ambassador Moon looked at her fellow humans. She saw fear in their eyes, but also something else. Hope, purpose, a reason to reach for the stars. We will need to discuss this with our people, she said finally. All of our people. This is not a decision 4 of us can make alone. Nodded. I understand. Take the time you need. But please do not take too long. The swarm does not wait. The meeting ended. The humans returned to Earth. And for the first time in history, humanity began to debate not whether they would fight, but what they would fight for. 3 months later, the United Earth Council voted. The decision was almost unanimous. Humanity would join the war, not as servants or subjects, as partners, as allies, as the warriors the galaxy needed. The Void Swarm was coming, and humanity was ready to teach them what Earth had taught Admiral. Some species do not surrender. Some species do not break. Some species fight until the end, no matter what. Humanity was that species. 6 months after the alliance was signed, the Void Swarm arrived at the system. Was a sovereignty colony, home to 12 billion souls. It had green forests and blue oceans, cities that touched the clouds and farms that stretched to the horizon. It was beautiful, and the swarm wanted to consume it all. The defense fleet met them at the edge of the system. 300 sovereignty warships, the best they could spare. They formed a wall of metal and fire between the swarm and the innocent world behind them. It was not enough. The swarm came in waves. Thousands of ships, each one a living nightmare. They had no metal hulls or energy weapons. They were organic, grown from hive mothers in the darkness between stars. Their ships had teeth and claws. Their weapons spat acid that could melt through armor. They moved like a swarm of insects, each one connected to a greater mind. The Sovereignty fleet fought bravely. Admiral commanded from his flagship, directing ships and coordinating attacks. For 3 hours they held the line. Then the line began to break. "We have lost 40% of our fleet," Commander reported. Her voice was steady, but her eyes showed fear. "At this rate, we will be destroyed within 2 hours." Gripped his command chair. He had seen this before too many times. The swarm would win, would fall. 12 billion people would die screaming. Then the sensors detected new contacts. 300 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel behind the Sovereignty fleet. They were smaller than Sovereignty vessels, sleeker, with designs that looked almost aggressive. Their hulls were painted with symbols and words in dozens of languages. Names of ships, names of crews, messages of defiance. The human fleet had arrived. Captain Hand stood on the bridge of the Soul's Resolve, Earth's first true battle cruiser. She was 41 years old with short black hair and eyes that had seen too much death. She had volunteered for this mission knowing she might not come back. So had everyone on her ship. "All ships, this is Captain Han," she broadcast on all frequencies. "We hold this line. Not one swarm vessel reaches that colony. You know what is at stake. You know what we are fighting for." She paused. "Today we show the galaxy what humans can do. Today we make them remember us. All ahead full. Attack." The human fleet surged forward. Lieutenant sat at the weapons console of the Soul's Resolve. He was 28 years old, young for such a position. His hands moved across the controls with practiced ease. When the first swarm ship came into range, he fired. The shot tore through the living vessel, leaving it spinning and dying in the void. "Direct hit," reported. "Target destroyed." Navigator plotted courses through the chaos of battle. She was 33 years old with a mind that could calculate trajectories faster than any computer. She found paths through the swarm that should not have existed, gaps that closed seconds after the Soul's Resolve passed through. "Hard to starboard," she called out. "Enemy formation splitting. We can hit their flank." The battle raged for hours. The swarm had never faced anything like the humans. Sovereignty ships fought in formations, following tactical doctrine that had worked for thousands of years. Humans fought differently. They improvised. They took risks. They did things that Sovereignty computers calculated as impossible. Pilot flew his fighter into the heart of a swarm carrier. The massive living ship was 3 kilometers long, filled with smaller vessels ready to launch. His fighter was barely 50 meters. The odds were laughable. But had studied the swarm's biology. He knew where the weak points were. He flew through defensive fire, dodging acid sprays and grasping tentacles. When he reached the core of the carrier, he armed his reactor for overload. "Tell my wife I love her," he transmitted. Then he ejected. His fighter exploded inside the carrier. The living ship tore itself apart from within, drifted in the vacuum, watching the destruction through his helmet visor. He floated there for 6 hours before rescue ships found him. He was smiling when they pulled him aboard. On the medical deck of the Soul's Resolve, Medic Shin worked to save lives. She was 35 years old with gentle hands that could perform surgery in the worst conditions. When the ship's hull was breached, she kept working. When the power went out, she operated by flashlight. When supplies ran low, she improvised with whatever she could find. "I need more bandages," she called to her assistant. "And plasma, we are running out of plasma." "There is no more," the assistant replied. Looked at the wounded soldiers waiting for her help. Some of them would die without treatment. She made a decision she would never forget. "Start blood donations from the walking wounded," she ordered. "Anyone who can spare it. We are not losing anyone else today." The battle reached its peak when the swarm concentrated its forces for a final push. Thousands of ships converged on a single point, trying to break through to. The Sovereignty fleet fell back, unable to hold. General commanded the Indomitable, a heavy cruiser that had once been the pride of Earth's fleet. He was 70 years old, too old for this fight, but he had refused to stay behind. "All ships rally to my position," he ordered. "We are the last line." The human ships gathered around the Indomitable. They formed a wall of steel and determination. The swarm crashed against them like waves against a cliff. The Indomitable took hit after hit. Its shields failed, its hull cracked. Fire broke out on multiple decks, but General did not order retreat. He could not. Behind him were 12 billion lives. "Keep firing," he commanded. "Keep fighting, they do not pass, they do not pass." When the Indomitable's engines exploded, knew his ship was dying. He had seconds, maybe less. He opened a channel to the entire fleet, human and sovereignty alike. "Tell them we held," he said. His voice was calm, almost peaceful. "Tell them humans do not break." The Indomitable went down fighting, its guns blazing until the very end. But its sacrifice bought time. The other ships regrouped. They found their strength again, and slowly, impossibly, they began to push the swarm back. When the battle ended, the swarm had been driven away. Not defeated, not yet, but stopped. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Void Swarm had met an enemy that would not run. For the first time, they had tasted something like defeat. Admiral watched the human rescue ships pulling survivors from the wreckage. He had doubted these strange, soft-skinned creatures. He had called them defenseless. He had been wrong. Park's voice came through the communication system. The old professor sounded tired but proud. "That was the battle of Admiral, the first of many. I told you we would show you what humans can do." Allowed himself to smile. It was a strange expression for his species, but he had learned it from the humans. "You have shown me," he admitted. "Now tell me, Representative, what happens next?" On Earth and across the galaxy, humanity answered. They built more ships. They trained more soldiers. They developed new weapons and new tactics. The Void Swarm was vast, perhaps endless. The war would be long and terrible. But humans did not care about odds. They did not calculate whether they could win. They only knew that they would fight. Today, tomorrow, and every day after until the threat was ended. Because that is what humans do. That is what they have always done. When the universe tells them they cannot win, they fight anyway. When the darkness comes, they light a fire. When all hope is lost, they find a way. Admiral had learned this lesson. The Void Swarm would learn it too. Humanity was no longer alone in the stars, and the stars would never forget them.